Hey everyone, and welcome back to Good Till Canceled. This is our weekly market rundown where we talk about what's going on, current events in both the investment and financial planning world. And before we get started, I do want to just thank to all those who have subscribed to our YouTube channel, watched our videos, liked our videos. We greatly appreciate it. Chris and I were just, we're financial advisors. This is not what we do for a living, YouTubing, making YouTube videos. It's something
Obviously not.
obviously not. It's something we're just trying to do. So seeing people actually subscribe to our channel, watch our videos, like our stuff, interact with us, and some feedback that we've gotten, it kind of gives us a little bit more motivation to continue to create content, make it a little bit better each week, right? Get 1% better each week and make more and better content. So thank you to all of you who have subscribed. Without further ado, let's get into what's going on this week. Chris, why don't you take us through the first topic?
All right. So we got some affordability indexes that have come out with some new numbers. Everything's looking back to June. So everything's a little bit backdated, just the way it works. Moving averages. So the first thing, I don't even remember where I got it, but the National Association of Realtors has their own affordability index for housing.
Right.
And it basically shows, we'll put a picture of the chart up, that over the last year, housing is the least affordable it's been in the last year. So that may come as no surprise whatsoever to anyone that's been trying to buy a house.
Right.
Housing prices that feel like they've been going up just sky high over the past at least year, if not 2 years. So this chart, just to explain it a little bit, right? We're looking at June as a reading of 146.3. So just to give you an idea of what that actually means is that a value of 100 means that a family with the median income has exactly enough income to qualify for a mortgage on a median priced home. So basically, like, the average family has enough income to buy an average priced home and an average priced place. So anything above 100 means that it's more than enough income to qualify. Anything less than 100 means that you wouldn't have enough money to actually be able to purchase a home. So this takes into account 20% down payments and being able to cover 25% P&I insurance. So over June, it's 146.3. What's interesting is that there's no numbers below 100. So everyone's still able to afford a house. It's just the lowest that it's been in the past year. What's interesting is January, 187.8, the highest that it was last year. I don't really know what was going on in January, but it seemed to be a good time or the most affordable time to be buying a house. So looking at that chart, it got me thinking, right? So not even over the last 1 year, what has housing really done over the last, I don't know, decade or more time, right? Or how do you compare this to the housing boom in 2008? You get a lot of comparisons like, well, housing, again, you're just looking at housing prices. Housing prices are sky high. They start thinking back to 2006, 2007, 2008, the housing crisis. What goes on with that? So we found from First AM, they have their real house price index. So they actually come out and they actually say that house buying power adjusted for all of these other factors is actually 42% lower than what it was in 2006. So housing is actually 42% more affordable than it was in 2006. So they take into account where mortgage rates were, right? How incomes have factored into it, inflation and stuff like that. So to give you an idea, mortgage rates have basically been cut in half since 2006. So I think it was like 6.3%. Now it's just under or just about 3%. Again, it's the lowest it's ever been. And also nominal household income is increased by 55% over that same time period. So taking into account all of those factors, right, we can see that based on the chart that we're going to put up, right, the green line is the housing affordability index, or the real price index that we're talking about is almost half as low as it was, 42% lower than it was in 2006. So on relative terms, taking into account everything that's going on in the market, housing is much more affordable than it was in 2006.
Yeah.
And they have a couple notes. They mentioned a couple things in there about why the rise in pricing is maybe not as worrisome as it was in 2006. So looking back to 2006, we can see that housing was demand driven, right? So there was a lot of demand, whether that was from flippers. So that was a big thing that was going on in 2006, a lot of speculative buying. Also, there were those new mortgage and newfangled ways to finance your home, right? So people were buying a lot more home with a lot less down or the same amount of money down that they would be buying today. So that contributed to it as well, variable rate mortgages, stuff like that. So whereas today, right, it's almost entirely just supply constraints, right? So there's just not enough supply out there. And also our millennial counterparts are all trying to move out of the cities and buy homes now, and they just haven't been making homes.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot different environment, and it's maybe not as worrisome as some people, have been mentioning to us or that we've been reading, right? So it's pretty interesting that the housing overall is just a lot more affordable than when it was back in 2008. I think they say some of the best times to buy housing was like in January, like 2011 was some of the best times. So obviously right after the crash was a pretty good time. And then back in the 90s was a great time to buy housing as well. But I know, Alex, you have like some points on housing and why that's not really an investment, and maybe again, pricing shouldn't really be a factor in that.
Yeah, I mean, you should never, if you're buying a house, you should never look at it as, well, now's the right time to buy it, right? If you need a roof over your head, you need a roof over your head. And if you're planning on living there 10 years, 5-10 years, it really doesn't matter. A house is not an asset like people think. It's not liquid. Yes, you get money put into it, you get equity into it, but you shouldn't look at it as an asset. But I think that's some interesting points you made, Chris, because I have heard from, friends and, some clients, could we be heading towards a housing, collapse similar to 06, right? And, if, like you said, there's a lot more that goes into it than just home prices. And housing recessions and housing collapses aren't something that, like, they're not quite the same as economic recessions where they happen every 10 years. They just don't. Housing has historically been very stable throughout, our years. There are points where it goes down and there are points where it goes up. But most of the time, if you look at it, it remains pretty stable. So, just something, with everything you said, with all these points, that I think it's a good thing to take into account when you're considering, buying a home. Is the housing market going to collapse? That's not something you can plan for. What happened in 2006 was there were so many things going wrong and that were unforeseen. It was like the perfect storm.
Right. Basically, right. If you're trying to buy a house, don't wait, try to time it and wait for a better opportunity, because again, this is it seems like a pretty good opportunity, right? Wages are up, inflation's moderate, maybe will moderate, and mortgage rates are all-time low. Like something we've talked about a lot, adds to affordability. So.
Yep. All right. Next topic. We've kind of hit this over the head a few times already this year. The capital gains rate proposal. Obviously, we've talked a lot about Biden's new tax plan. And, I know some people get sick of it. It's the big, elephant in the room when it comes to investing, when it comes to people's incomes. So the new Democratic proposal for the top capital gains tax rate is 25%, which would be up from 20 currently. And that's not including the 3.8% Medicare surcharge tax. So really it's, going from 23.8 to 28.8. This is a lot less than the rumors or the proposal we were hearing about in the beginning of the year of, 39.6% for those making over $1 million. This would just be the new top capital gains tax. So those making over $445,000 as single and $501,000 as joint. So it's going to then be 15, 20, and 25 would be the three proposed. 0, 15, 20, and 25 would be the new capital gains tax rates.
Are they keeping the 20? Or are they taking the 20 and changing it to 25?
Well, sorry, sorry. Yep, they're changing the 20 to 25. So 0, 15, 25. For those of you keeping count at home, that's right. So the new proposal leaves out the much discussed step up in basis rule. So originally they were thinking about getting rid of that. What that rule is let's say you have parents, they have, a home they bought for $500,000 and it's now worth $1 million, right? Or a property or an asset of any kind. When they die and leave it to you, you inherit that property, asset, whatever, and you immediately get a step up in basis. So the new basis on it would be the $1 million. Therefore, if you were to sell it, you would not realize any capital gains tax on that. The original proposal was looking at getting rid of that for some, individuals making a certain amount of money. There was a lot of pushback on that, and it seems like that's now being left out. Something that, obviously keep an eye on. I think what people were saying is, you promised you weren't going to tax anyone making over $400,000. Well, this might end up making people that don't make that much money pay taxes, because if you're leaving it to children who don't make as much and now they're owing capital gains taxes on it, I think that's why it received a lot of pushback. Right. And also now there is a 3% proposed 3% surtax on individuals with adjusted gross incomes of over $5 million. So kind of a super wealth tax almost that they're throwing in there.
Yep. And I think that they're also looking at changing the top marginal tax bracket back to what it was previously, the 39.6% too, right?
Yep.
And all of this, they even said, will be looked back to September 13th of this year, right? So ideally, if you sold stuff before September 13th, that's not going to be taxed at the new marginal tax brackets or the new capital gains rates.
Yeah. Originally, they said it was going to be retroactive to April. So, we'll see.
As long as it keeps getting pushed off every 6 months, they'll just keep moving it up 6 months. So,
yep. Again, keep in mind, all this stuff, still proposals, nothing set in stone. Don't make any rash decisions based off of these proposals.
Yeah, please. I understand politics plays a large part in people's lives, but please do not make any rash decisions, like Alex was saying, to your accounts based on any kind of political beliefs or anything like that.
Just remember, in 3 years, there's another election. There could be a whole different president there that changes the tax laws again. Right. Our tax law is forever changing. It's really hard to make, you can plan for short-term taxes, but to make rash decisions on political and, what party's going to tax who, it's not usually the smartest move.
No. Yeah. And we've written a few blog posts about that as well. Right.
Yep. So, all right. The next topic I'm going to let Chris talk about, because when you brought it up to me, uranium, and you said it was the new meme stock, I thought it was an actual stock called Uranium. I didn't realize that people were actually buying uranium that powers nuclear energy.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is pretty crazy. I guess Wall Street Bets has taken their interest from GameStop and AMC and is now focusing on uranium and companies that are involved in the production of or mining of uranium. So uranium, I guess, is a main component in nuclear activity, and it's actually a very form clean of energy. I think the main problem with it is a lot of the things that go on around the disposal of it, the waste byproducts that come from using it, and I guess the overall just bad nature of any problems that have the big bang problems that have come along with it that we've seen, like Chernobyl and the place in Japan and 3 Mile. Right. So some of those problems kind of still loom, but I think people on Wall Street Bets and Reddit users are taking interest in it because it's again, a very clean form of energy usage, production, what have you. So it kind of fits nicely into the clean energy thesis that we're seeing evolve over time, or at least over the last year. So just to give you an idea, right, the uranium futures price, and we'll post this, is up from 27.5 to 42.5, again, more than 40% in the last month or so. Any kind of mining stocks that are associated with uranium have gone up 100 to 200%, 300%, 400%. Again, pictures of these just in the last few days, really for no reason other than just the Wall Street Bets and the kind of the Reddit meme stock phenomenon that we've been seeing. There's the Sprott physical uranium trust. Now, this has been mentioned as a possible reason for a lot of these prices to be going up. So I think it's the biggest one out there, buying uranium and things that have to do with uranium. So someone mentioned that it was a significant driver of the rally that we've been seeing. So a lot of money going to that. There's also even a uranium ETF, believe it or not, shockingly, that there's an ETF for everything still. That's up over 40% just in the last month. So, in case you missed it, uranium is the next meme stock. So, AMC, GameStop, uranium.
Yep. Great. And I mean, that's a good transition, the clean energy topic, right into our next topic of ESG, also known as environmental, social, and governance funds, right? So ESG is something, and Chris and I, as financial advisors, our firm in general, we're becoming more and more aware of it. We're hearing a lot more about it, and it's becoming more prevalent in everyday investing. Some of that you'll see from some of the charts we'll show you, some of the big players are making big pushes to become part of the ESG. And so, Chris, why don't you read some of these stats?
It's pretty staggering. It's been a trend, but it seems recently over the last year or so, it's been picked up on a lot more. So just some of the stats that were in this FT article, right? So $97 billion have flown into ESG ETFs just in the first 9 months, or this says first 7 months. So since up until July, they have stats too, versus 89 billion for all of last year. So we're well ahead of whatever we were doing for last year. They talk about regulate, like why the push is, or why so many assets were flowing into these ETFs. And they mentioned one of the big things is that the regulators in Europe are making a big push for a lot of these pensions and foundations to really have ESG as a consideration in their investment process. So that's contributing a lot of it. So think about if all of these pensions and foundations and investment companies have 10, 20, 30% mandates for something ESG. Now, all of a sudden, that's shifting a lot of assets there. So again, a lot more money is going to be flowing into this area. Doesn't necessarily make it good, but it's something that's, again, going to be on a lot of people's radar, and it's going to be a topic that's continued to be talked about. Looking backwards, something that we try not to do. Past performance not indicative of future results, but Morningstar has had some research that 25 out of 26 equity index trackers that were ESG related have beaten the actual benchmarks that they were associated with. Now, impressive, yes, but a lot of it may have to do with individual sector bets. So ESG, you could probably take out, last year probably had less energy in it than maybe technology. And we saw energy do very poorly last year, maybe industrial stuff like that. That's more cyclical. Banks that are more cyclical in nature maybe have done worse than the overall market. ESG funds are maybe underweight those. So sector bets are going to be a big part of it. But individual stock selection also still has something to do with it. So picking the better ESG focused company in between, Coca-Cola and Pepsi or what have you. And then just the surveys that they talk about of how much people are actually expecting to use as ESG in their portfolios is pretty astounding. So 27% of respondents in a consultancy interview or survey thought that sustainable investments would outperform their relevant benchmarks. 11% thought that ESG would help reduce risk. What else? 8 out of 10 institutional investors expected to use sustainability criteria in their investment decisions by 2026. 18, or let's see, together over BlackRock found that a group of 425 institutional investors overseeing $25 trillion plan to double their allocations to sustainable strategies from 18% to 37% by 2025. So, these are just massive numbers of people that are going into the ESG focused funds. Now, there are some downsides to this, right? So one of the major concerns is something called greenwashing, where people are just talking about ESG and capturing a lot of this money and not actually using it for any kind of green ESG focus. So, capturing this money and then not actually doing anything with it, or talking about it and not actually doing anything with it. So that's a big problem.
Very similar to like the blockchain, right? A few years ago, and CBD, like just using trends, right? That everyone are looking for to kind of, attract investors. So
right.
It may not be, exactly what you're looking for.
Right. Yeah. And even, the article does a good job of pointing out like the other side of the coin, right? So it talks about I think it was, who was it? The chief investment officer for sustainable investing at BlackRock, and the head of the ex-head of sustainability for DWS both left their positions, or not there anymore, because they felt like the asset managers, BlackRock and DWS, were kind of not abiding by what ESG really meant. So one person even likened it to selling wheatgrass to a cancer patient. And I think that ESG has a place in people's portfolios if it's something that you feel strongly in.
Yeah.
The thing is to understand what exactly you're buying. So when you're buying an ETF or when you're buying a fund, right, you're buying individual companies that do certain things, right? So these ETFs all have their own criteria that may not line up with whatever criteria you want. So for example, right, we just had a client who wanted a very strict set of ESG criteria, right? One of them was no more than 10 or 5% revenues from companies involved in firearm sales or something like that, right? So we looked at ETFs and mutual funds, but most of them had something where it was no more than 20%. So there's no guarantee that that's going to line up exactly with these kind of more stringent criteria that you might have. Also, right, people have different points of views as to what ESG really means. There are companies, and Alex has done a lot of research on this as well, that, may be really good in one area, but maybe fall short on the other two areas.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, we could probably do an entire video on ESG and really get into, the roots of it. And, depending on how far down the rabbit hole you want to get, it's kind of some crazy stuff when it comes to these ESG funds, right? I mean, in general, ESG, when clients come to us and say, I want to do ESG, right? We have to ask them, what does ESG mean to you, right? Because it's environmental, it's social, and it's governance, right? So Facebook, for instance, they don't have a large carbon footprint. They put a lot of money towards being green, right? But are you okay with what they've done with people's data? I mean, they've been pretty egregious on that end. So, there's no perfect companies out there. Again, I think you can look at some of the bigger banks, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, they all rank very low on carbon footprint, right? Financials generally don't have a lot of, carbon emissions or anything like that. But you can't tell me those companies aren't lending to companies that might have it, right? I mean, so it's right. Really, and again, the biggest ESG ETF in the world, ESGU, the top 10 holdings are the same top 10 holdings of the S&P 500, right? And I think the reason being is you can see with all this pressure and all this talk, what's going to happen is the ESG funds are just going to eventually become S&P 500 index funds, because the 500 biggest companies in the world are not going to want to be left out of these ESG funds. If all this money's flowing into it, they are then going to just shift more and more towards what is considered ESG, right? According to whoever tells us what ESG is. And I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about it like that, but
yeah, I think that this probably lends itself to being something that's more like a separately managed account thing for a lot of people, when
they can pick individual companies. Like
they can have analysts that are digging into individual companies and really understanding the companies, and they can really tailor the criteria to exactly what the person's looking for, whether that's environmental, social, governance, religious, it doesn't have to just be ESG. There's a lot of other factors that go into these things. And just the broad, definition of ESG doesn't fit everyone's needs as far as that goes. To Alex's point, right? No S&P or Fortune 500 company is going to come out and be like, no, we don't want to be more inclusive. No, we don't want diversity on our board. No, yes, we do want to pollute the earth as much as possible.
No one's going to do that, right? They can't. So eventually, all these companies are just going to shift more into the ESG, and ESG is just going to be the biggest companies in the world that can afford to put the resources behind it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll see. I definitely don't think that this is a trend that's going to go away, but it'll be interesting to see. We'll post some pictures here of what or photos of kind of the assets that are in the ESG space right now. And what is amazing is that BlackRock, it's maybe not amazing that BlackRock is the leader in this space, because they are just a leader in ETFs in general and manage trillions of $7 trillion, $8 trillion. But it is almost unbelievable how far and beyond they are of everyone else. Yeah. The next, they have well over $120 billion in ESG assets, and the next closest is like 35, 36. Right. So, and that's shockingly UBS. I don't know, Vanguard is way down the list. So is State Street. So is Invesco. Those are major ETF players, and they're so far away from BlackRock. I wasn't really expecting UBS and Amundi to be the next round out the top three for ESG asset providers.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Like I said, we could do a whole video on ESG because I think there's some crazy stuff out there. But let's move on to our last topic, something a little different. Chris found an article through kitsis.com. Michael Kitsis, a big player in the certified financial planner world. And it's the easiest money saving phone calls, right? So these are phone calls. These are just simple things we can do to maybe save a little bit of money. And really all it just kind of requires is your time and effort. But we thought we'd just put a few in here just to, again, there's some pretty good ones in here, I think. So the first is call your credit card issuer. So obviously we know credit cards come with interest rates. There's certain credit cards that will allow you to do a balance transfer. And they'll charge a small fee, but it's kind of, minimal compared to, if you're paying ongoing 27, 28, 29% APR, you can transfer to another card, get 0% APR for a certain amount of time, whether it's 12 months, 18 months. And sometimes that's beneficial, but you can kind of call your credit card issuer, just ask for a lower APR, right? Say that I'm going to transfer my balance to another card that's going to offer me 0% and see what they say.
Right.
So that's good.
There's no harm. That's a big one. Get rid of that credit card debt. If you can't get rid of it right away, lower the interest rate that you're getting charged on it for. Yeah. And that's the best way to do that. Mm-hmm. Call your insurance. These are all things that these are all things that we've already heard a million times. They're just, maybe it's an extra nudge to get you to do it. Right. So the next one would be call your insurance provider. Have any of your think about if any of your circumstances have changed. Did you add an alarm on your house? Did your car go in the garage now? Did you live in the city and now you don't live in the city and you didn't change that? Or, maybe you got a new car, or like whatever it is. Think about it. How long have you been with the insured? You get a discount for being with your insured for X number of years. Can you bundle home and auto? That's always a big one, right? Mm-hmm. Or any kind of other personal belongings that you might have. I didn't realize. So we just got engaged. You can put your engagement ring or expensive jewelry underneath of your, homeowner's insurance as well. So that's another way to save some money if you're doing that. Can you prepay your bill for the entire year? So some places won't let you do this, but maybe it's not the entire year, but maybe it's every 6 months. I know for my auto insurance, I can pay the whole year it's the whole year's worth in 2 semi-annual payments, and it saves like $300-400. So it's well worth it. Can you get any discounts based on your employer through whether that's health insurance or, car insurance, or, do you belong to a gym that you can get any kind of discount for that? So those are questions that you can always ask your insurer and try to lower that bill a little bit as much as possible. And usually they'll be pretty amenable. They're not going to list those discounts out on their website or something. So you try to just talk to someone and get as much information as you can.
Yep. And then call your phone or cable company. This one probably is the biggest battle you would fight. But if you're willing to put the time and effort into it, maybe you end up with a few extra free channels, right? I myself cut cut my cable. I don't have cable. I have
Neither
streaming.
do I, yeah, or neither do
So,
we.
because I was tired of dealing with these guys, and they just raise your bill, and you call and you ask why, and then you're on hold. You get transferred all over the place. So I would say good luck with that one.
Right. Yeah. That's again, worst case scenario, you end up on the phone for a little while longer and you end up getting a few free channels or extra free channels.
Depends on how much you value your time, right? Is the savings really worth what your time is worth to you, right? So
Right.
that's the question you have to ask.
Exactly. And I'll skip this one because I'm not actually a homeowner or a homeowner in the traditional sense. So call your county assessor. Alex, do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah. So I actually get every year since I've lived in my house, I've gotten a letter around March where it basically just says, fill this out and you may be eligible for a reassessment of your property, right? So basically they come out, they assess your property value and what the taxes will be on it. Obviously it's a double-edged sword, because if the assessor comes out and says, oh, you're not paying enough tax on it, your taxes could actually go up. But I think the majority of the time, taxes just go up because they go up, and you sometimes have to stay vigilant, have an assessor actually come out and assess your property to get, hopefully get your real estate taxes lowered. So, and those are just a few things you can do. And I would say like a nice trick would be, maybe one day a year, right? Or a certain time every year, make a list of some, things like this. Sit down when you have the time. Maybe it's a slow time in the summer, a slow time, during the winter or whatever it is. Make a few calls, right? Spend a few hours doing this, maybe save yourself some money, right? So every year, just kind of look at, when you're reassessing all your finances, say, hey, can I maybe pay lower on my cable bill? Let me give them a call. Can I maybe pay less for insurance? I'll give them a call.
Yeah, and we'll link to so full transparency. I found this through Kitsis, but this is actually a college investor article, so we can actually post a link to this.
Yep.
He actually has a fifth step, and that's you don't actually have to make any phone calls at all. So he actually gives 3 companies that you can actually have do this for you. I'm assuming you probably just give your information, you give the contact stuff, and then they call on your behalf and lower your bills for you. So that's something, again, maybe well worth your time, especially if you're dealing with Comcast or Verizon.
Yeah. Yes. I actually had one of those services a few years ago. I forget what it was called, but you pay like an annual or a monthly fee. And they'll cancel stuff for you too. So like there's certain stuff that's like almost impossible to cancel, like Sirius XM. I'm talking to you. They'll call on your behalf and go through all that crap, and they'll get it canceled for you, and they'll get it off your bill. So
nice.
Yeah, so I'll post that link in the description. But that is it. That's all we have for this week. Again, thank you to everyone that has subscribed. If you haven't, we really appreciate it if you did. Like the video, leave a comment. If there's a topic you want to hear about, let us know. We'll be happy to, oblige. So thank you, everyone, and have a great week.
Talk to you later.